Good morning to everybody that has logged on to our webinar this morning. We appreciate you taking some time here to explore the impact of team performance. My name is Bill Bergstrom. I'm the President and COO of Thinkwise, and with me today is Steve Griffin, who's Vice President of Strategy and Consulting. Hi, everyone. So we are certainly very excited to talk through the content that we have today, and again appreciate you taking time out of your no doubt busy schedules to join us and really dive into the results and data and conversation generated based on our 2015 team performance survey. So as typical with webinars, we'll spend a little bit of time here just on some quick housekeeping. We're assuming that folks on the line, at least a majority of you, have downloaded the report. The folks on the line have had an opportunity to receive some invites to download the report, and we're hoping that everybody has done that. Today's presentation, we're actually experimenting with a new Microsoft product called Sway. Maybe some folks on the line are familiar with that. So to say that there's a traditional slide deck to share, after today's presentation in the sense of like PowerPoint in the past, that's not the case. So hopefully by following along not only with the presentation, but maybe the report, if it's there handy, will really help bring today's presentation to life and add value. All of you should have on your screen here some audio settings and an opportunity for questions and answers. Please let us know through the Q&A functionality on your screen if there are audio challenges. And also feel free to use the questions and answer section to submit questions throughout the presentation. What you'll think between Steve and myself is a conversational tone, and we hope that you enjoy that and engage with that. Feel free to reach out to us through that Q&A functionality on your screen, and obviously we'll address those hands being raised, so to speak, throughout and at the end of the presentation. Lots to cover, lots of good takeaways today, and so we'll get right to it. Before we kind of dive in, what you have on your screen right now are a few bullet points that really outline the flow of today's presentation. And again, before we dive into that, we'll talk just a little bit about why we undertook the team performance survey like we did, and again, hopefully bring that to life for you. There's nobody on this call, and there's nobody within Thinkwise that would disagree with the value of high performance teams, right? There's no executive out there that really is going to say, hey, look, high performance teams aren't important to the overall success of our organization. So what we set out to do quite sincerely was engage with senior leaders. We had over 100 respond to our survey outreach, and really look to highlight, performance realities of teams within organizations, define the characteristics and traits of high-performing teams, and again, provide insights into how the teams are actually performing, with the goal of generating a valuable conversation and highlight what folks should be thinking about within their own organizations when it comes to team performance. Most everyone in an organization associates with likely multiple teams within their organization, and they're defined in multiple ways, and we'll dive into that as we go through the presentation. So let's, what we wanted to look at were, again, the conversations that should surround high-performing teams. So what you have on your screen is how we're going to do that today. We're going to spend a little time. I'm going to kick it over to Steve here in a second and look at some trends and key findings kind of right out of the gate, and then explore team performance realities, and again, dive deeper into traits. We'll talk about the business case, right? Anytime you're going to address, performance within the organization, there are reasons to do that, right? We're all about moving the needle from point A to point B within our organizations, and then we'll look at improving team performance, kind of as a plan within your organization. So, anything you want to add to that, Steve, real quick about what we're going to do? And if not,
no, but it'll be fun.
Dive right in.
Yep, thanks.
We'll dive right in.
All right. So we're going to just start off by talking about some of the key findings from the report. I think there's a lot of information here, as Bill mentioned, that's pretty fun and exciting. Some information that's both troubling, but as well as an opportunity. So I think for folks who are on the phone, whether you're a leader or a leader within HR, or you're an expert consultant out there in the marketplace that support leaders and team performance, you're going to be able to walk away with quite a bit of information to make some impact. So within these 4 bullets, we'll dive into each one of these areas to help explain what we're referencing when we talk about things like team size matters, right? You have small teams which could be under 10 to large teams, which we find to be the case typically in healthcare, which could be teams of over 50. Anyone that's on the phone certainly knows concepts like group thinking or mob thinking. You already know what's going to happen with the data as teams get as large as 50 per leader. And we'll talk about some traits that are extremely relevant and very important, things that are both measured and observed, like communication, and what's happening with performance management around team and team performance. And then we'll end up and wrap things up into how do you plan for success. So some of the findings here, team size certainly is going to hurt you if it goes unchecked. That's something that's going to be important that we'll dive into. Communication tends to be worse in larger organizations, larger structures. And this leads to larger structures allowing more assumptions and inferences, leading to behavior. And if that goes unchecked, it leads for some disaster. Performance management, we'll dive into that later on because in and of itself, that's a whole different topic, right? Right now, we're starting to see the emergence of performance management, probably in the past 2 or 3 years, suddenly going away, but it's not. You're always going to manage performance. Really what's going away is the technique. So that's something that we could certainly spend a whole other hour chewing on. And then we'll end up, like I said, talking about success. And I think planning for long-term success is really going to wrap around better organizational design. I think org design is going to be key when you talk about teams leading to performance.
Yeah. Again, there's some really great data that we'll dive into. I know we're going to talk a lot about size and communication. There's the statistic that is in the article about 35% of variation on a team's performance can be accounted for simply by the number of exchanges amongst team members, right? But what does that really mean, and how does that come to life in an organization? So that's an example of a statistic that we'll look to dive into as we go throughout the report. And we'll look at our first piece of data here. So this first slide here, again, is a snapshot of overall team performance realities. A simple question that illustrates that senior executives are saying overall our teams are not performing to their full potential, right? Better part of 60% of those respondents. So, what does that mean, and how does that kind of come to life within an organization? We reached out to a large diversity of organizational size. In our survey, we defined a small business as less than 100 employees, a mid-sized business between 100 and 1,000, and a large organization of 1,000 or more employees. And the data that's here in the conversation behind this piece, this overarching data piece that's very interesting, is team leaders, when asked this question, were more critical of team performance than team members.
Right.
which, again, as far as commentary there and what that means to pay attention to, again, it aligns with the visibility to results that team leaders have in their position in an organization versus the traditional sense of team members. Steve and I, again, are going to kind of bounce back and forth here, so you'll see both of us interacting here. But again, an interesting finding that illustrates, again, the visibility to what results really mean and kind of sets some further discussions that we'll have throughout the report. And I think another key component when we ask some general team performance reality questions in our survey was interesting that the least optimistic respondents to our survey lived within mid-sized organizations. I know, Steve, you have some thoughts about how that rolls up to the realities of small organizations versus large organizations versus how we define mid-sized organizations.
Yeah, I think here vantage point matters quite a bit. I think the vantage points lead to differing opinions on performance and organizational strength. So I think the closer you are to your team, meaning the smaller the size, you have a better idea of what success looks like because you can see it, you can feel it, you're part of the milieu. And I think as you get to be part of a larger organization, let's say over 1,000 people, according to the data that we collected, you start to see that distance create some anxiety. They start to get really, really worried because they don't have the metrics that are down there on the shop floor anymore. And when they don't see it, they don't believe it, and then they start to entertain some of that anxiety, and they get overwhelmed.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question that it has to do with what you highlight there. You know, anecdotally, as organizations grow and kind of evolve from small to medium to large organizations, maybe not surprisingly, that middle size is some of the toughest transitionary time for an organization as well. So if you're a part of that group and those companies that are experiencing growth, you know, pay real close attention, again, to those communication components and the opportunity that we'll continue to highlight about defining team success so you can continue to see results and your team leaders stay excited about what they're accomplishing within an organization. The next slide grows. Now, we talked a little bit in the previous slide, we talked a little bit about organizational size and team performance. This really starts to highlight the realities of team size. This is a very, very common question and a common conversation that needs to happen within an organization. Steve highlighted it already. If team size goes unchecked, we have challenges. And so it's very important to pay attention to team size. Lots of questions that we get, you know, not only from the survey, but just in general about what's that number. Our data illustrated 10 or less in regards to high performance coming from teams that are 10 persons or less within the organization. What's important here, again, is that the data that's on your screen really highlights the dramatic delta between team performance on a team that's less than 10 employees versus a team that's larger, 10 plus, certainly 50 plus. So unchecked team size is a critical component to keep track of. Great Jeff Bezos quote there on the screen: if a team couldn't be fed with 2 pizzas, it was too big. Certainly he's in the news a lot about culture. Some stones being thrown his direction here very recently in regards to culture. Kind of interesting how, you know, less than basically 0.1% can create an article in the New York Times, but that's a discussion for another time. But again, what we need to be able to pay attention to is that delta. So when you're looking to have high-performing teams, this can be very strong data for you to share and use internally and internalize, for what that means within your organization. It looks like we had a question or something we wanted to rephrase based on our conversation.
Yes, the questions are starting to come in, which is great. Keep them coming. For those who haven't downloaded the report, there was a question about what industries are represented. Bottom line, every industry is going to be represented, and there's charts and data in the download. So go to the website that we posted earlier to get that information. But real quick, people were asking about what size organizations do we talk about when we say small. So really quick, small was defined by under 100, mid-size 101 to 1,000, and then large, of course, over that.
Yep.
So that's the breakdown of what is meant by size of organization.
Yeah. So size of team is going to be one of the critical takeaways from today's presentation. Again, because it's so easy for us to, and because we certainly understand that organizations of all sizes have teams defined differently. We're going to peel back that more in the next couple of slides. Understanding, if you're a large organization, you may have teams defined by region or function or department or location, those types of things, versus self-selection, which, Steve's going to look at here on this slide.
Yeah, so self-selection was pretty interesting here. Every organization, regardless of who they were, said self-selecting into a team is going to lead, by and large, to higher performance in that team. But when you get hired, no one gets hired into necessarily a team unless you're like us, right? An organization of under 5 people. Healthcare, where organizations can be tens of thousands of people, you typically get hired in because you're a one-to-one fit. We need a physician to practice that physician role. They're not being necessarily truly brought in as a team member from the definitions we're providing in our survey. So self-selection certainly generates better performance according to every executive that had taken it, our survey, but it creates a challenge for the front end of human resources, doesn't it? It almost screams that an applicant needs to be treated like a shopper. They need to be a consumer, and they need to be provided more of a shopping experience so that they can almost choose the team that they join. That's going to really change the way HR and organizations function, though. That we just don't see that in any organization for the most part.
So, again, this data gives an opportunity as far as takeaway and actions from the presentation to highlight the value of giving team members ownership, kind of over their team. That's the word I chose. And certainly ownership over the results of their team. I came from an organization that had a very large sales force, and that sales force certainly had team goals. One of the things I would argue we could have done more effectively at that organization was break down that sales force into more dynamic, smaller sections and groups within the sales force that would lead to, quite frankly, a more competitive spirit, more ownership over the results of their regions, their kind of SKUs, for lack of a better word, that they were out there in the marketplace selling, and really create a camaraderie around the team sales results there that could drive results for the organization. And that really, again, kind of sets up the next slide, which we put a unique graphic up there that's, 63% of respondents believe self-selecting teams perform better. You saw on the previous slide that only 11% of teams are self-selected, right? So there's a big delta there, and in executives saying, yeah, our teams are better when they self-select, but we just don't let it happen very often.
No.
So, go ahead there, Sneed.
Yeah, so when you think of self-selection from a psychological perspective, it's what does self-selection kind of provide you? What kind of glimpse does it give you about someone, right? It lets you know that the person has some drive, they have passion, and a slant towards taking action or having action orientation. And they want to seize the moment, right? If you thought about anything you've ever done, volunteer to do because you wanted to, that's self-selection versus, Steve, can you do this? In my head, it's, I got the expertise. I think I can do it. Do I want to do it? Well, I start to entertain that I think you need my help.
Right.
And now I'm starting to compromise my drive versus what you want, and then the deliverable is hopefully you get what you want, right? So there's something there to be said about self-selection, and versus the other side, you're being told what to do, right? There's something there. There's almost a slump in someone's shoulders, and you're told, do this. It's like, this is like the last thing I'm going to do right now is the dishes.
Right. Right.
Right. We've certainly had those experiences.
So, what we found is that this conversation about the value of self-selection, kind of confirms our industry experience, and we highlight this on page 6 of the report, that appointing leaders based on previous leadership role or job title contributes a lot less to team performance than say past experience with those particular individuals within a team environment. And the highlight in that last graphic there too, think of Silicon Valley hackathons.
Right.
These are legendary, right? They're most everybody on the call, maybe even participated in a hackathon, but certainly heard about the concept of high intensity, high passion, short, timeline, self-selected groups that are given the opportunity to, over a 24-hour period, over a weekend shut-in, do very creative, very passionate, very forward-thinking work within organizations, right? Happens a lot out in Silicon Valley, real famous, whether, Atlassian, we're big Atlassian fans, they have ship it days, right? They're legendary for their quick, creative results based on small teams that are passionate about an idea. So again, when you look in the mirror of your own organization and say, how can we help accomplish higher team performance given the parameters, right, that we live within in our organization, knowing that people are a part of teams based on job family, job function, location, so on and so forth. Try and overlay that with maybe a hackathon type of experience and look at ways where you can be creative. Consider starting with the end in mind, right? Clearly defining what success of a team looks like can help you with team size and opt-in opportunities, and again, really help create an environment where you have teams that are effectively achieving results as opposed to just a team that's together because they happen to be in the same department.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I just one more comment about that. I think that's an organizational mindset, right? That says anyone who wants to get involved and solve a problem, go do it. And second, we'll provide cloud coverage.
Right.
We will protect you and let you go do what you need to do to fix it.
Which, the hackathon is the cloud cover, right? By saying, hey, we're going to do this, it creates that opportunity for creativity.
Go break something first.
Right. Right.
Break it even further before you figure this out. Bill, so this is a slide that's just going into the traits a little bit, and I know you wanted to talk first about innovation a little here.
Yeah, and please don't hesitate with questions here. We realize we're covering a lot of ground and hitting some high points of the report, and there's a great deal of detail there. But yeah, we're going to give me an opportunity to talk about the downside of these traits first, and then Steve will follow up with the upside. I just wanted to highlight two of the three lowest, least, or what was rated maybe least important by our respondents as far as a trait of high-performing teams. And note that two of the three include the word innovation. Again, this is in line with data that we're seeing in our experience that said, be careful of asking teams to innovate. And have that be a real goal or a real outcome or a real trait you're looking for. Teams, and there's a difference between kind of creative problem solving and innovation. And what our data consistently finds is that teams can be quite creative in problem solving and getting a task, kind of complete, so to speak, but be careful with asking a team to be wildly innovative in a strategic sense, in an organizationally strategic sense. And our data consistently shows that high-performing teams, that's not a trait that they're necessarily looking at. So I wanted to highlight that as kind of two of the lowest components or least important traits of the team, because I think it spurs an interesting conversation about results, which we'll continue to dive into. But notice the word innovation as opposed to creative problem solving.
Right. I think when you're told to go innovate, you almost get scared because you don't know what that looks like. It's too abstract. Problem solving says, can you fix this? That's different. I know that I need to sit down, look at a problem, and figure out the equation and just keep going until I get something right. Innovation almost screams, I'm going to pay you to go tinker, break something, toy around for a while, see you in a couple of years. No organization really has that pain threshold. Right. So asking your teams to be innovative and to, quote unquote, just tinker for the sake of tinkering and see what happens. You go from making Kleenex one day, and guess what? By tinkering, we're now making holographic, computers. I don't think that's going to happen by being told to go do it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So on the flip side of Bill's, comments on some of the negative traits, talk about two of the positive things that are pretty important. One is communication, the other one commitment. Communication we see not only in our team performance data in our own surveys, but also in our 360 results. The larger the organization, communication is typically rated as one of the worst attributes in a leader or worse traits in a team that the larger that organization. And I think it's just because too much delegation happens, too much assumptions start going around, and when assumptions happen, you get misalignment, a lack of follow-through and process, and just a lot of organizational design work just falls apart. Right, so communication is going to be essential, and it gets rated really, really high when you get to a smaller team being under 10. And if you look at the research, that research rings true. It says small teams that are highly effective range between 8 and 12. When you start to get closer to that 12, though, you're going to start seeing some breakdown in communication, but the teams are super strong at 8 and 10. Anything larger than that, it's just too much bandwidth. You're just being stretched too much. And there's too many people, cliche, in the kitchen, so to speak. So that's going to be something that's going to be utmost important for organizations to really tackle. And the other one is commitment. The smaller the team, it's easier to hold everyone accountable. So commitment stays pretty tight. I mean, you end up with your own motto, your own creed, right? You stick together a little bit better versus a larger organization. That commitment goes completely away because you stick to your job description. You're just one of 50, in that nursing leadership structure. It gets to be really, really difficult, and communication breaks down, commitment breaks down from a larger team perspective.
Yeah, I think what we have on the screen, are averages of high-performing teams. It's very interesting, and there's a quick line about it in page 8 of the report. But there's a great line in there that says, or there's an interesting stat there on that page. We didn't actually call out all kinds of numbers in this, but larger teams of basically 10 or more people underperform these numbers in almost every category. So again, just the penalty for large teams is pretty severe, but then also critically important, again, is understanding objectives, working towards those objectives, and communicating throughout that process. And we're gonna dive into some more information on what we mean by performance and what it means for team success. Quite frankly, here in these slides coming up.
Yep. So now we're going to start transitioning into some of the business case. So why is paying attention to high-performing teams really all that important? We all can say that we want our teams to be high-performing and they contribute to something positive about the organization, but we're going to get into the nitty-gritty as far as what is the value that a high-performing team actually provides. So the data here was kind of aggregated with all the response from the executives who had taken our survey, and as the slides start to transition, you'll start seeing that the data got broken down into two key areas. And if you want to dive further, the importance of downloading that report becomes pretty evident here. So high-performing teams build a lot of strategic value. Those are things that are highly abstract and difficult to measure. But leaders are wanting high-performing teams in their organization because they're seeing that it builds brand affinity, brand appeal, and those are great recruiting tactics. It provides long-term value and supports a positive organizational culture, as well as providing some tactical value, which I think everyone today could walk away with, is understanding these three things on why should we be focusing on managing high-performing teams and supporting them rather than managing. And it increases staff retention, right? No organization is sitting there hopefully saying, you know, I can tolerate an 80% attrition rate, right? So your affinity for that brand will go away real quick because Glassdoor will pick up that information pretty fast.
Right.
Profitability, I mean, you talk about bottom line. This is where executives say, you know, when it came down to brass tacks, my high-performing teams are actually providing me some unique financial, you know, gains here. And then risk mitigation. You don't have to worry about high-performing teams. They just get it done, right? They're your black ops. They're your, you know, SEAL 6. They just take care of everything. They just do it. You depend on them. And even when you are told that there is a problem, the next sentence is, and we resolved it.
Yep.
Right? And that's what the value is for high-performing teams. With the data that's here between the strategic value as well as the tactical value, you know, some commentary that I had when I went through the report and Bill and I were talking is that, you know, having too many people involved in a team, and that's certainly when it exceeds 10, it's going to lead to inefficiencies and process problems. It leads to less effort. Right? You know, everyone's been to that meeting where there's just way too many people there invited, and you get overwhelmed by an attendee list of, like, say, 20 plus people, and you sit in the boardroom. You know that you're there to take notes because nothing is going to get done. No one's going to be held accountable, and you're going to walk away going, great, I sat in a meeting, I wasted my time. You know, I could have done something much more effective than sit here, you know, in a meeting, and guess what? I walked away with no to-do list. Because there's just way too many folks involved. And it leads to inaction. Instead, just a piece of instruction would be, you know, ask someone to take the lead and to create a self-selection team. You know, with self-selection, two common things that happen when you're in a design phase is you're going to get alignment a lot faster than getting 20 people to hit accept, right, through Outlook. And then you're going to get processed right away because everyone that's going to be involved, especially in a small team, they're going to start suggesting ways to create process. So I think it's going to be much more important to get self-selection because you're going to get alignment and process in place versus sitting in a boardroom with a bloated team.
Yep. Yeah, we talked a lot about this particular slide and the tactical value. You know, folks on the call, those things hopefully are fairly straightforward, right? Those are numbers based, and when we talked about strategic value and we're talking about affinity and brand appeal and organizational culture, you know, we're talking about you know, different stories that we have, and again, an organization that I was a part of, it was very interesting in how teams affected the wellness results as a goal of an organization a larger organization that I was a part of. And just real quickly give an example where that organization was a sales-driven organization, manufacturing, distribution, big sales force, support staff, so on and so forth. And, you know, there's great data about engagement, employee engagement, and how, you know, wellness programs can help, you know, in that employee engagement. Anyway, to make a long story short, it's interesting as that particular organization really embraced a wellness culture and was looking for participation and ownership in that business process and that business outcome. Opportunities were put out there to participate in wellness events, and one was required a great deal of travel. A Michigan-based organization doing an event in in Oregon, quite frankly. And it was a self-selection opportunity, and a few of us took it on and ended up being a group of 12. And that group of 12 ended up kind of becoming a pretty strong team that went on to participate in a number of travel-related wellness events. And it was interesting when that happened, how that trickled out to the folks that were, in the factory, so to speak, and in the front office, and how that self-selection opportunity and the way that fanned out and the fun that first group was having and the results that first group was seeing fanned out into efforts and ownership, both in the front office and in the factory. And after a few years, you had a very well-defined wellness approach within the organization with different groups taking ownership of different types of wellness events and really creating a lot of opportunity for quite a good-sized organization to embrace ultimately a real business result that leadership was looking for. So, just an anecdotal story there revolving around the strategic value of setting a goal, giving opportunities, allowing people to select into them, and watching the results follow.
Yeah. So a question that's coming through or seems to be of interest to some folks are really related to pages on the report, so I'm going to just call them out.
Okay.
So on page 9 is for folks when they download it, pay attention to, because this is where it breaks down the differences between high-performing versus average teams and where their value add is recognized. And then on page 12, you're going to see differences between average, underperforming, and what that difference gap is with traits and what kind of traits what kind of traits are associated with underperforming teams. So I think those are 2 pages that will help folks on the phone follow.
Sure.
When they get there.
And actually, the page 12 certainly sets up the next section of today's conversation.
Yeah, this is where we're going to start talking about improving team performance.
So a fun little graphic here of our folks, an image of what behaviors are associated with poor team performance. Now, 3 bullet points there: avoiding accountability, poor communication with a leader, and blaming others for poor performance. My guess is those are some characteristics that everybody on the call has seen, experienced, had to deal with, and aren't that pleasant to be associated with. It's interesting, again, the data for this slide is on page 12 of the report, and those are especially avoiding accountability and not communicating are the number one trait, or first and second most likely traits to be found in underperforming teams by a fair amount, and quite frankly, those first 4 are pretty good size on that page.
Yep.
We've kind of touched on some of the components, and we're going to dive in a little deeper to action steps around avoiding these traits and these behaviors, which would providing clear definition of accountability for the team. Again, understanding what poor communication with a leader really looks like. You go back to some of the early statistics, and well-run teams are basically communicating, whether again opt-in teams or predefined teams, daily and at a minimum weekly. And of course, the daily versus weekly is a direct reflection on the type of team one would be a part of. Mm-hmm. But when we're talking about poor communication, that's the kind of frequency we're talking about. Daily interactions with your teams, at the very least weekly checkpoints with them to make sure that people aren't blaming others for poor performance, that poor performance is being flushed out, as well as the successes being celebrated and milestones being hit along the way towards that ultimate goal.
Yeah.
So again, some characteristics that I don't think are necessarily uncommon in the workplace but their impact on overall team performance is dramatic and therefore need to be called out.
Yeah, and I think you're right. They're not uncommon. I think the issue is that they're too common. They're unfortunately they're tolerated, and they get easily kind of overlooked and swept under the rug for one reason: it's too difficult to deal with.
Right. And
since it's too difficult to deal with, and my team's too large, the best thing I can do is be a mayor. I know to be voted back on as a leader on Monday when the weekend's over, versus truly impacting with my team. And it boils down again to something we talked about before with group thinking. It just, there's too many folks, so someone else will deal with it. And then you think the weekend happens, Monday comes along, yay, I'm the leader again, and magic happened. No, you still have a lack of accountability. You're communicating poorly by that example, and you're just not managing anything. And everyone on your team is blaming someone else. Right? And that points to the accountability as being an issue here.
Yep. Yeah, so the next slide is going to build upon improving team performance and really, again, some actionable steps for folks on the line to help make sure that the teams are performing. I'm going to highlight really three. We're talking about page 13 on the report. And the first one we're going to highlight is that is the whole idea of bench strength and again, identifying talented people to participate in effective teams. Companies need to know their bench strength, right? Again, not a new concept. But when you couple that with, again, the positive impact of self-selection and the positive impact of having team leaders based on results and balancing that with the need to have leadership in place in an organization, it really highlights the value of understanding the availability of your human talent within your organization, and that statistic is reflected in the report. The value of highlighting folks that are ready to be leaders and have the passion and the business acumen to help drive success can be very, very important to the overall success of your teams. Conversely, when we know folks are leaders and team leaders within an organization based on, maybe attrition, based on tenure, those types of things, be ready to develop that leadership so you can generate those results. We have a tool to help do that, right? We have a team assessment that can highlight where there are deficiencies in the overall performance of a team, which allows you as an organization to then go out and highlight those deficiencies and provide the tools and the learning opportunities so that team can be more effective long term. Different than, say, like a hackathon type of an approach, right? And so we're balancing, the different types of team interaction that can happen within an organization, but knowing that hackathon has a different kind of result than a team based on a job function or location or so on and so forth. You have different tools in order to lead to those successes.
Yeah. So adding on to what leads to success, at least from the executives who were the respondents of our research, the bottom line is it's one thing, but it's two ways to get there, and it's the collection as well as the communication of performance behaviors. Whether they're high performing or underperforming, everyone says the collection and communication of that performance data is crucial. What's kind of sad and funny at the same time is, what do underperforming teams scream they need the most in order to get better, right? They want more attention paid to the measurement process. Yep. The thing, high performing teams are saying, don't do that. You're going to interfere with us doing well. Let us perform. Don't sit here and nitpick and watch and account for every 15 minutes of my workday. The underperforming teams are also wanting just additional measurements in order to create success on the team. high-performing teams are not necessarily aligned to that comment either. And they just want more things. They want more training in our survey, right? They want more tools, more training. Bottom line, they want money. That's what they're asking for, is a budget line to create this. And it's just no way in the world does having more of anything actually lead to something better.
Right.
You know, it leads to things, jokingly, like cavities, being overweight, and all sorts of things. So you got issues here that people want more, thinking it's going to solve their problems, and it's just going to create it's just a blow up. It's going to create paralysis, too much information, to the point that you pay attention to nothing, except the CEO and CHRO and hopefully the CFO are looking at those budget lines gone, we spent all of this money fixing things and nothing happened. We're in the dark on this. Right. So really pay attention to the difference of what high-performing teams are saying. Absolutely. Is we're good to go. Back off.
Yeah, we know what we're going after. We know our what success looks like, and we're making gains towards that. And in the fight for corporate dollars, it's about illustrating results. And so being real clear on what those results are and how to get there is really, really important. On page 14, there's a great takeaway on this, that, you know, the greatest difference in the ability to improve team performance rests in how a team succeeds or fails to collect and communicate performance data. So we're creeping in here on 50 minutes. We want to leave some time for Q&A or give you a few minutes in your day back. And so, you know, in summary, you know, we're certainly, again, well aware, everybody's well aware of barriers that exist within modern day organizations to team performance. And yet again, as we highlighted in the beginning, no one's questioning the value of team performance. So again, the goal is about what conversations do you need to be having, what things do you need to be paying attention to in order to ensure, regardless of team makeup and regardless of how someone is or how passionate someone is being or is about being on a specific team, you know, pay attention to team size, team communication, performance, and what that means, and that long-term planning and that approach to boosting team performance.
That's right.
If you can focus on those four things and use our report, use the granular data that exists here to help bolster your arguments, knowing that in some cases you may be pretty good at some components of these, but likely to be not so good at a couple of others. What's the data that exists there? What's the conversation, the questions you should be answering in order to improve team performance across the board? Thinkwise, in closing, is an organization that's set up to specifically help facilitate those conversations. We have the assessment tools, we have the learning and development tools, we have the competency-based tools that help highlight the conversations and the opportunities you have within your organizations in order to be able to develop individuals for sure, but arguably most importantly teams, and understanding that individual development can be a direct derivative of overall team performance when you understand that all of us are really tied ultimately to our team's performance, our direct team's performance. Mm-hmm. Anything you want to add to that, Steve, in conclusion?
Yeah, so I think one of the unique things about the team performance survey is the ability for the entire team to be included. Yeah. And it's pretty rare that a whole group of folks can be involved providing feedback. And that's one thing of the 4 bullets that we walked away with, was that communication is pretty key. And utilizing that tool allows everyone on the team to want to be heard, gives them the opportunity to really contribute to measurement on how well they are doing and where they could improve. and it holds everyone accountable, which was another trait that we saw underperforming teams have as well. So I think it helps with that. So it's just a neat opportunity for a team really to get together and figure out what do we need to do to get better.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So certainly, hopefully helpful. We'd love to open it up to questions. A few were submitted that hopefully we addressed throughout the presentation. But based on those 4 critical takeaways, or the more granular data that may be in front of you in your work environment right now, we have a few minutes left for questions. Are we seeing any
I think we've wrapped up a lot of what people were saying, and there was certainly a few more questions that came through, but they're quickly answered by letting people know they need to download the report.
Okay.
Because there's much more data available in the report that reflect a lot of the answers they're looking for.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think in conclusion, we would appreciate, we appreciate everybody logging in, and hopefully it's been helpful. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.